I'm a DP and ND filmmaker, and this is my camera rig. It's not just for B-roll or gear reviews in my office. It's my real deal camera setup I use on actual film sets. So in this video, I'll break down what's in this build, why it works, and how it changes depending on the shoot. So if you're looking for a rig that's built for real world filmmaking and not just some fancy bloated numbers on a spec sheet, you're in the right place. But first, let's strip this thing down and talk about the brain of the setup. The actual camera itself, everything is built around. My main camera body for projects is this guy, the Zcam E2F6. I also have a Canon R5 I use for smaller projects, but today I'm going to be focusing on my cinema build, which is the Zcam. When I tell other filmmakers I use this camera system, they typically look at me like I've lost my mind, and it's usually because they've never even heard of this brand before. While it's not a mainstream camera brand like Canon or Sony, for example, I picked up this camera because it solved most of the problems I had with my main camera at the time, which was the Canon R5. First, it shoots ProRes internally, which is a codec I absolutely love working with, especially when it comes to color grading. I know it's a large codec, but I still love it. Sure, I could use like an Atomos Ninja 5 to shoot ProRes or even ProRes RAW to their little SSDs, and I did do that for several years, but I was limited to using that monitor only because it was also a recorder, and I felt like I was stuck in like the Atomos system. They kind of remind me of GoPro in that like you have to get their accessories for their monitoring systems, and I didn't like that. On top of that, the Ninja is only a 5-inch screen, and I wanted to use like a larger 7-inch monitor. Again, outside of the Atomos system. Plus the Zcam doesn't overheat like the R5. The Zcam can also shoot open gate, which I'd never done before, but that's when you record the entire sensor. And it also has other aspect ratios like 4:3, which is great for shooting anamorphic lenses. And the lens mount can be swapped out for just about any lens system. Now the three I have personally are the EF, Leica M, and PL. It's also a full frame sensor, so it has decent low light performance, and I really like the small square form factor. Now, I know that kind of sounds strange because I'm building out a larger camera system, but that's kind of my point. I like the smaller square form factor because it allows you to build the rig exactly how you want around that small camera body. The next thing I'll talk about is the camera cage and really the whole core of the camera rig. So when it comes to building out a camera, there are two things for me that are absolutely non-negotiable. The first is the camera has to have a cage, and the second is it has to have a top handle. I really depend on these two things for their mounting points for accessories, and when we start putting this thing together, you'll see exactly what I mean. The cage I'm using is made by a company called 8Sin, and the top handle is made by Nitsi, or Nitsi. I don't know. If you know how to say it, let me know, because I honestly don't know. Prior to getting this camera, because I got it secondhand from a DP out in California with like a whole bundle of everything included, I'd never heard of these two companies before. But after using this build for almost 5 years now, the quality of this stuff is absolutely amazing, especially because I was used to using companies like Small Rig and Tilta, which aren't bad, but this is way better. I also use a side handle made by a company called Revolver. This was specifically made for the Zcam, and it allows you to press record. You can also adjust settings from these little dials here, either by scrolling or you can push in the dials. The button system on the Zcam isn't the best, so this makes things a lot easier when adjusting settings on the fly. And being a rosette mount, you can adjust the angle to something that's comfortable for you. To finish out the core of this rig, I have an 8Sin base plate and a riser. This allows me to attach rods for a follow focus or a matte box. On top of that, it also has rosette mounts for side handles if you're using like a shoulder rig, for example. And one of the coolest things about the plate itself, granted it's a small thing, but it is really cool, is you can loosen it and it allows you to shift your camera forward or backward. Now, I found this extremely helpful when balancing a heavy camera setup, which is typically what I like to run, on a tripod. To finish up the core of the build, I have a cage on the back, and I believe this is called a Z back, if I'm not mistaken. This gives me even more mounting points for accessories, as well as 3 NATO rails. Now, I don't know if you've ever used a NATO rail, but they are awesome. You should definitely do it. The back also protects all of my wires that are connected directly to the camera from being bumped or accidentally pulled out. And I don't know if you've ever pinched a cable before, especially like a thin HDMI. It prevents all that. Now let's move on to the monitor, which is this FeelWorld 7-inch external monitor. Now I have an entire video on why I like large, bright monitors just in general, and if you want to check that out, I will put a link down in the description. So this guy also has a cage, which is made by Neatsy. And while I do get more mounting points on this cage, it's more or less to protect the monitor itself because it's made from some pretty thin plastic, so I just want to make sure it's protected. I have it mounted onto the top handle with this little pivoting monitor mount. That way I can adjust it forward or backward depending on the shot we're doing. It's a pretty straightforward monitor with all the tools you would expect to see, like your false color, focus peaking, and your LUT integration. Now there are 3 main things that sold me on this monitor specifically, outside of price because it is very cheap for what it is. First, you can hot swap 2 batteries, so you don't have to worry about your feed dying on you for an entire shoot, which is fantastic. 2, it's extremely bright, which is great because I do a lot of shooting outside, you really need that when you're competing with the sun. And 3, which may sound small and irrelevant, but I love the fact that the HDMI plug comes out of the bottom of the monitor. In the vast majority of monitors I've seen and the ones that I've used in the past, the HDMI connects to the side, which for me is just one more place where you can damage your cable if and when really you bump into something. I love a rig that has streamlined cable management, if you can't already tell, but it is extremely important when you're trying to be efficient, especially if you're doing run and gun and you're moving very fast. Now it's time to put the follow focus on the rig, and let's also put a lens on it so it makes a little more sense. I always use a follow focus when shooting narrative work and have a first AC to pull my focus for me. Now, if I plan on using my side handles for a shoulder rig, I will run a single rod through this top little rod support and place my motor on top of the lens. And this little support just stays on my rig just at all times. Otherwise, I'll typically run the follow focus on the bottom with rods through the base plate. And full disclosure, this kind of all just depends on my mood as I'm doing the build. So this can change from time to time, but that's generally what I do. My main follow focus motor is this Nucleus M, and I also have the original Nano motor, but I typically run the larger one for 2 reasons. First, it has more torque, which I need for my crusty old vintage lenses, especially the 35mm, which probably needs to be serviced, but that's a different topic. And 2, the cable that powers this motor, the larger Nucleus M, is a 7-pin connector, which is a way more solid connection than a micro USB or even a USB-C connection. I find USB-C, especially micro USB, to be extremely annoying to use on a camera rig, especially because I like to run everything through DTAP as well as have it all streamlined. Now, if me saying that upset you, I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of people that love their USB-C connections out there because they're quote unquote so easy. But this is just the way that I found works best for me and my workflow. Now I give my first AC and director a video feed, and I generally use the Axune Cine 2 Pro transmitter and receiver. I always mount it on the right side of my build because I'm right-handed. So when I'm using a shoulder rig, the transmitter and the antennas, which are way too tall, stay out of the way. I also mount it with the display facing outward, which doesn't allow it to go completely flush to the camera build, like straight up and down, but it's so the HDMI cable comes out through the back. Otherwise, I would be bumping my hand into the cable when I'm holding the side handle, and if you do it enough times, you're gonna lose video feed, probably a new HDMI. So that's why I do that. Now, powering this build is extremely simple, and that is by design. The monitor and transmitter are powered by a Sony NPF style battery, and the camera is powered by a large V-mount. Now, I know there's a lot of love out there for the smaller 99-watt V-mount batteries, especially because everybody wants the smallest build in the world these days. And I love them too. I have 4 of them myself. However, this larger battery, or with this larger battery, I never have to turn off the camera during a shoot, which is exactly what I prefer. I want to avoid wasting time turning the camera on and off to preserve my battery. I just find it unnecessary. That way we always have an image up so we can continue to shape lighting. And I also like to have my gaffer, when I have a gaffer, to have a video feed. This single battery, just this one, will last about 18 hours continuously, and that's with shooting takes, which is awesome. The battery itself attaches to this plate in the back, which gives me 3 DTAP ports as well as a USB-A out, which I never really use, but it's there just in case. Now, this entire camera rig can change and adapt to whatever shooting scenario I'm found myself in, which is why it works so great for me. The lens mount can be swapped out, so I can use just about any lens system out there, whether it's my personal lenses or a set I'm renting for the shoot. I can also ditch the entire base plate system, get rid of the video transmitter, and throw in a small V-mount battery if it's just me doing like a simple run and gun shoot. And just that alone lightens up my rig significantly. I have spent years, quite literally, slowly dialing in this setup to fit my needs when it comes to indie and commercial work. And while it may not be perfect for everyone, it's perfect for me and my needs as a creator. I'm sure you're a camera nerd just like I am, so tell me about your camera rig. What are some things you can't live without, and what are possibly some accessories you're looking to add or you would like to add in the future? And if you'd like to see me use this camera rig on a real short film, pretty much to a T, check out this video right here. It's a behind-the-scenes breakdown of the film slideshow. And if you're a video and especially a lighting nerd like myself, I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, as always, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with me today, and I'll see you again very soon.